Next up, we have Jen Roytz, Executive Director of the Retired Racehorse Project. This panel is brought to us today, sponsored by the Iowa Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association. Jen, as I said, is Executive Director for RRP, which is a nonprofit organization really dedicated to increasing the demand of thoroughbreds for riding as sport horses. And I like to paraphrase and say I think that what they've done very successfully, Stuart Pittman, which I know Jen will touch on, has really done an amazing job at setting a market value, a positive market value for a thoroughbred as they exit the track. Jen also is the co-owner of Top Line Communications, Lexington-based marketing agency that canters to thoroughbreds, sport horses, and non-equal. That word took me off there. They cater. Okay, there is no N there. Okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking centers, and then I really got thrown off. She also is a columnist. I'm sure many of you have read her work through the Thoroughbred Daily News and also in all of the thoroughbred trade magazines. She holds board and committee affiliations both with the TAA, the Kentucky Horse Council. She's also an advisor to the National HBPA Aftercare Committee. So with that, I will introduce my good friend Jen Roytz, who wrote an amazing story about our horse that Dennis actually put in the Horseman's Journal. So thank you.
Thank you. Nice little reminder that I am not as tall as you. Thank you guys for having me. I wanted to start with kind of a question for you guys, and it's a little bit general, but I want you to think about, there's all this talk about aftercare in the industry. There's been all this talk about aftercare today. When you think of aftercare, I want you to ask yourself what that actually means. When you're picturing what aftercare is, when you're talking about it with someone else, what is the picture you're thinking of, and what's the story that you're trying to tell? And I would venture to guess that a lot of us in the room, when we think and talk about aftercare, it is that idea of the horse transitioning from the racetrack into wherever it's going to be retrained for that second career, whether it's a TAA accredited organization. There's about 70 of them now, and they're fantastic. There's a lot of other nonprofits who are not TA accredited, but only for the reason that they just don't fit inside of the TAA criteria. Turning for Home and New Start in Pennsylvania are two great examples of that. They're both fantastic organizations, but I just don't think, if I'm correct, they don't meet the TA model for funding. There's also a lot of for-profit aftercare efforts out there, and when I say for-profit, they are not making gobs of money and rolling in dough from transitioning thoroughbreds, but it means they're just not nonprofit 501c3s. These are riding stables, show stables, or individuals who are taking horses off of the track, and part of their business model, or just for the pure enjoyment of doing it, they're transitioning horses into second careers and selling them as lesson horses, as show horses, whatever. And then there's also those people, if that's not enough, that are the end users, getting them directly from the track, whether they have a relationship with the trainer or they have seen that horse in the paddock one day and they kept up with it and wanted to get it off of the track. For whatever reason, they choose not to go through an aftercare organization, but they get it directly from the track. So usually that's what we think of when we think of aftercare. But if you start thinking about it more, and obviously as the director of the Retired Racehorse Project, I think about it a whole lot. There's more to it. There are all of the opportunities that have to be created and have been created for horses off the track, so people have reasons to want a thoroughbred as a riding horse. The Thoroughbred Incentive Program at the Jockey Club and the Take Two program up in New York funds horse shows and classes at horse shows all over the country. I think probably well over 2,500 at this point. So if people are competing with thoroughbreds off the track in the show ring, they can compete in thoroughbred-specific classes at those horse shows, or they can earn awards for being the top place thoroughbred at these horse shows. So we need to continue to cultivate, as part of aftercare, all of these opportunities for these horses off of the track. But then there is a third part of that scenario that comes into play, and I think that's where RRP shines the most, and that is letting people know about all of these opportunities, because you can have the best idea in the world or the most incredible opportunity in the world, but if people don't know about it, they don't know what they don't know, and they can't do anything about that. And so it takes connecting the equestrian world with the racing world and educating them about why an off-track thoroughbred is a great option, and also all the things they can do with their off-track thoroughbred. And as we all know, they're a lot different to ride and transition than a lot of other horses. They're not any better or worse. I personally think they're better. You probably do too. They're just different, though, and so you need to educate them on how to retrain these horses, especially if they're amateur equestrians. It's just the little things that make a big difference to make taking an off-track thoroughbred not intimidating to them. And so that's what the Retired Racehorse Project does. We are not an aftercare organization that adopts horses out to people, but rather we support those that do both nonprofit and for-profit. Our mission is to expand the market for thoroughbreds after racing, to increase their value and to increase demand for them in equestrian circles. We do that in a number of ways. The biggest way and the most prominent way that most people are familiar with is the Thoroughbred Makeover. We put on every year a $100,000 competition. Actually, we need to change our marketing on that because it's actually up to about $125,000 in prize money now. But it's a competition for recently retired racehorses in their first year off of the track. These horses can have up to 18 months since their last race, so it's great even for a horse that may be retired with an injury and needed time to rehabilitate, but they cannot start their retraining until December 1st, the year before they're going to compete in our competition. So really the competition's in October every year. So these horses have 8 months of training, and it's a great showcase of what horses can do after racing. There's 10 disciplines they can compete in, everything from barrel racing and ranch work to hunters and jumpers and eventing and dressage, competitive trail, polo. Basically anything you can do with a horse, you can do with a thoroughbred at this competition. And we actually have a little video that we'll play for you that kind of gives you an idea of what that competition is. The suspense is killing you, I know. Thank you. And actually, to give you just kind of a sidebar, the girl at the end, Elisa Wallace, who won the competition last year, is an Olympic-level equestrian. She was shortlisted for the Olympics the last time around, and I would venture to bet she'll be in contention for being on the Olympic team this next time around. And she is passionately enthusiastic about off-track thoroughbreds, which is great for us because that means there will likely be an off-track thoroughbred in the Olympics again in the near future. But at the same time, the year before in this competition, it was a 17-year-old kid who won the competition with a retired racehorse from West Virginia that was an owner-brooder, rehome kind of horse, and the kid was a polo player, and he retrained it to play polo, and then basically paid for his college education, selling it for, I think, $35,000 after. So anyone can compete in this competition, from kids as young as 12 to top-level professionals, and the thing that is the great equalizer is they're all competing on horses that they train themselves in 8 months' time. So it's a really cool competition to watch if you've ever thought about watching something like that, or you might get a postcard someday in the mail that we send out to all of the breeders of the horses that are competing in this competition to let them know their horse is competing. So if you get one of those in the mail, or if you know of someone who has a horse competing and you want us to give them a heads up, we'd be more than happy to. But that's not the only thing the Retired Racehorse Project does. We do a lot more to try to expand this market for off-track thoroughbreds so there's more people wanting to get them after the racetrack. We publish a quarterly magazine. Amazingly, it's called Off Track Thoroughbred Magazine. And it's basically like the Mid-Atlantic Thoroughbred or even the Blood Horse, but for off-track thoroughbreds. It's a beautiful magazine. I wish I had copies for you today, but actually we've had so much demand for it lately that we are out of our winter issue. So it's a problem, but it's a good problem to have. But it's a magazine that has everything from training tips to feature articles about horses and their careers after racing. It's got a lot of information about all of the upcoming competition opportunities that people can take advantage of. And we always try to include a good amount of stuff about the racing industry as well to try to cultivate more racing fans out of that equestrian community. This next issue in the spring, since it's Derby time, is going to have a Handicapping 101 article in it to talk about all the ways that they can get involved with the Derby in a new way as a fan. So that'll be a good issue. Hopefully we'll run out of that one too, and we'll have to start publishing more than we do. We do 10,000 copies of that a year, and it's really good to have something like that in high demand because it just means more people are looking for off-track thoroughbreds. In addition to all that, we do a lot of marketing events across the country and educational events. We put on clinics all over the country in addition to the Thoroughbred Makeover, which is a very cool competition, but we do a lot of educational clinics teaching people how to retrain off-track thoroughbreds or showcasing celebrity trainers like Rosie Napravnik, for example, or Dan James, who trains horses for the movie industry, showcasing how they work with their off-track thoroughbreds. We have a lot of online resources. We've got something called the Thoroughbred Sport Tracker that's becoming very quickly very popular in the equestrian world, and it's basically a user-driven database for thoroughbreds for off-track talent. So you can look up any sire and see what their offspring are predisposed to doing in their off-track lives, whether they're good in the dressage ring, whether they're good at jumping. It's a great way for people to educate themselves outside of the industry about off-track thoroughbreds. We also have a bustling social media presence. We've got about 175,000 followers, a little bit more than that, on social media, which makes us one of the largest followings on social media of anything related to the horse racing industry. Aftercare, breeding, racing, everything. So that is an audience that is very engaged. They ask good questions. We do webinars on a regular basis for them. We put a lot of information up about not only aftercare, but also the racing industry, how to responsibly rehome horses, how to responsibly get horses off of the track, how to feed your off-track thoroughbred, how to retrain them, anything you'd want to know about that. And then we also, and I think today we've talked a lot about how important PR is to our industry. We do a lot of PR, not necessarily just for the Retired Racehorse Project ourselves, but for the industry, to try to get those good stories out there, not only in the industry media, but the mainstream press. And so a great example of that lately has been that we just accepted our trainers for the Thoroughbred Makeover this year, and so the trainers are accepted in, or announced in February, and then they train those horses until October. So they become 700 ambassadors for this aftercare movement. We have 12 of them now placed as bloggers at different websites and publications, and so they are going to once a month be writing about the process of retraining their off-track thoroughbred. And that'll be put in front of equestrians that train and ride all different kinds of breeds of horses. So it's a great marketing tool for us to have. And we also had NBC covering the Thoroughbred Makeover this past year, and they got a lot of footage that they are going to be using this year during race coverage. So we do as much as we can to kind of cultivate as much positive press for the industry as possible. So all of that is done because this organization is taking a market-based approach to aftercare. And so what do I mean when I say a market-based approach? We are working to expand that pool of equestrians who is open to owning an off-track thoroughbred. The TAA accredited facilities, like I said, I think there's 70 of them now. All of those combined can transition about 2,000 horses off of the track in a given year, which is fantastic. And that's more than Aftercare has ever been able to do up until this point. But that's not nearly as many horses as are coming off of the track every year. So you need other avenues as well. There's a lot of non-TAA accredited and non-TCA approved facilities, like what I talked about with Turning for Home and New Start earlier, that are also doing that. And there's also a lot of these trainers who are doing it privately. And I would estimate, based on the data we collect from all of our participants in the Thoroughbred Makeover, that's probably another 2,000 horses that they are transitioning off of the racetrack. So that's 4,000, if not 5,000 horses a year that are being transitioned, and that's huge. I think the more data like that our industry can collect from more than just like our group, we have a pretty wide pool of data that we can pull from with the Thoroughbred Makeover and the Retired Racehorse Project, but the more data our industry can collect in that vein, the more we can use that in a lot of mainstream forms. So equestrians need to keep turning over these horses, obviously. One person getting a horse from any of these different facilities, venues, private trainers, it's not something like with the Thoroughbred Makeover that they can compete in every year. They are not going to get a new horse every year for the Thoroughbred Makeover for their own pleasure riding competition, whatever. And a horse, might retire from the racetrack. I think the average age is 5. That's 20 or more years that it's going to live after racing. And so there needs to be a way to continue to get new people wanting to take on these racehorses after racing instead of just depending on the same pool you have year after year. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to go to a lot of different equestrian competitions throughout the country. We're working with the U.S. Equestrian Federation a lot to try to develop more grassroots involvement in equestrian sports using off-track thoroughbreds, which only then supports the industry by letting us, from a business standpoint, offload our product from the primary market to the secondary market. And our data with the Retired Racehorse Project shows that that's working. Our entries every year for the Thoroughbred Makeover have increased a minimum of 20%, but actually the last 2 years they increased about 35% every year. So a business that's growing 35% every year is huge. It's probably growing a little quicker than we can afford to do, but we're making it work, and thankfully the industry is helping us make that work. And so one of the most meaningful statistics that I pulled this year when I looked at all the data of who entered, and you look to see if you know any names or see any famous horses entered, 63% of the people who are entered this year in the Thoroughbred Makeover are new to that competition, which I think is huge. I think that is a very telling statistic because that's hundreds of people who are choosing thoroughbreds that probably haven't in the past and are trying something new with them and educating themselves about them. And then once they compete, or sign up, to compete in the Thoroughbred Makeover, we do a lot of educational initiatives with that group. So they tune into webinars every month on topics related to their off-track thoroughbreds. They get regular mailings in the mail. We do meetups all over the country wherever there's a grouping of these competitors preparing horses. We'll do meetups to educate them on certain aspects of the retraining process and also let them come together so they can brainstorm and have more or less roundtables with each other. And it ends up cultivating a lot of people in their network as well because they're always bringing friends from the barn or friends who are interested in horses, and that's more touch points that the thoroughbred industry has to more equestrians to continue to expand that market. Our social media presence is growing too. Like I said, we have over 175,000 followers. Just, I'd say a year and a half ago, that was around 160,000 followers. So more and more people are engaging with us on social media, and they are super engaged. They are asking thoughtful questions, and they're posting about their horses, and they're excited about it. And they're also excited about the racing industry. We always try to make the most of upcoming major races going into a weekend. and ask people who they're rooting for. And it's funny to see the evolution of our audience because it's evolving from I like so-and-so because he's gray to legit pedigree or past performance notes that give them reason to be following a horse. So these people are getting more informed. I think that's really promising for our industry and something that really needs to be cultivated as well. The data that we take on the people who compete in this competition is also telling us that our approach to trying to increase that price that people are willing to pay for horses after racing, like Eric said, that is one of our core principles for our entire mission. We see that that is increasing. Every year, we ask everyone who's competing in our competition, so roughly the last couple of years, that's been 500, 600, now 700 people. How did you get your horse, and what did you pay for that horse? And so, whereas the answer used to be, I paid $1,500 or less for it. That was, I think the average was around $1,350 to $1,400. Now the average is around $2,000 that they're paying for it. And a lot of these people are paying upwards of $4,000 and $5,000 for those horses off of the track. So that's really meaningful for horsemen on the track. If they have a horse that is coming toward the end of its career, it might start holding more value off of the track than on. And that's something that I feel like is one of the biggest ways we can support you guys as horsemen, because it just gives you, more of a reason to get your horses into their next career so they don't get hurt, and so you can get those new horses into your barn and make room for them. But B, it's a fantastic story for our industry to be able to tell in any media circle, whether it's a small internal track-based media or whether it's NBC asking you a question. We've also seen a lot of the people who compete in our competition, I'd say probably a quarter of them, compete with the intention of selling these horses after the competition ends. And we put together a marketplace at this competition for those people, and we market it to equestrians looking to purchase a horse that is a legit show horse. And so we've had everything from professional international competitors to Olympians to people who own very successful show stables coming to this competition to shop for horses for their clients, for themselves. And they tell us the biggest reason is there's nowhere else in North America where they can go and see so many well-started horses with legitimate, flat work and beginnings of their jumping or beginning of their barrel racing or polo foundation of training in one place. You can sit next to a ring. We have a ring set aside for all of the horses who are up for sale. You can sit next to a ring and see more than 200 horses in the span of 3 days. So for someone shopping as a professional for the equestrian industry, that's huge. And so we also ask our competitors, if you sell your horse after the makeover, how much is that horse selling for? And every year the price they're able to sell their horses for is going up by almost $1,000, which again drives home the point that we are creating, and a lot of other efforts in the industry too, but I strongly feel that the Retired Racehorse Project is a big part of this, creating more value for these horses after the track. So I say all of that in tooting our own horn and tooting the industry's horn to say this. We have talked all day about how our industry is in pretty significant need of public relations right now. And we have been for some time simply because we don't have someone doing it for us. So we need to do some things for ourselves. And aftercare, I strongly believe, is one of, if not the biggest PR tool that our industry has. It's a good story, and there are a ton of ambassadors to engage that can help us speak that message. At our offices, after everything started coming out with everything that was going on with Santa Anita and all of the breakdowns, I said we have an engaged following. We were inundated with questions. And I don't think, and I personally would not think if I were in your position, I don't think the racing industry thinks about where those equestrians who like horse racing but are not necessarily savvy horse racing fans or investors in the sport, where they go to get their information. And so when they're seeing things on CNN or seeing things on Fox News or on the Today Show, they, have questions about it themselves because it's the media taking shots at an industry that they very much love and care about, even though they are not as savvy as anyone in this room most likely. They care about this industry deeply. And then they are also, we kept hearing time and time again for the people who would message us on Facebook or on Twitter or send us emails, or even several who called our office. They are getting asked by the people at their barns who look to them as their thoroughbred expert, or the people they work with who know nothing about horse racing, but they've seen something on the news. They're asking these people what the deal is. And they are not armed with the information to tell them and to be our advocates and our ambassadors. So I think this is a really telling scenario that's playing out, that there is this massive group of people in the equestrian world who are ripe for our cultivation as a horse industry. We've already gotten them over the first hurdle. They like horses, and not even just horses, they like thoroughbred horses. And they're interested in horse racing. They watch the Derby, they watch, the Triple Crown, and probably the Breeders' Cup too, but beyond that, they might not be that engaged with the sport, but they want to be. And they are becoming more savvy the more you give them information where they will actually find it. And cultivating them, I worked at Three Chimneys for about 7 years, and the farm did a lot with giving tours and trying to do as much as it could to cultivate a bigger audience for horse racing. And I saw time and time again people who would come on our tours repeatedly, and then a year or 2 or 3 later, they would come back as an owner. They'd own a piece of a racehorse with some friends, or they'd get in on a partnership. So that is a cultivation mechanism that works, and I've seen it happen firsthand. And I've also seen with the Retired Racehorse Project, we've had a couple racing partnerships that have very low entry points. Wasabi Stables is one of them up in Maryland. They've started engaging with the Retired Racehorse Project to market to our audience, and they've had a lot of people in the equestrian world get in on one of their racing partnerships and buy in on a fractional horse, and these people love it. They're already used to spending gobs of money on horses, and they're doing it for a 79-cent ribbon. So getting in on a horse where there's actually potential to make money, and to be quite honest, it's probably a lot more exciting than watching a horse figure eight around an arena and jump over a few jumps. It's a very easy market to tap into, and I think we can tap into it from the betting perspective and the ownership perspective. I really also think that we need to help thoroughbred racing better educate our owners coming into the industry, like these people I'm talking about, on how to come up with a plan for aftercare for their horses. People are so much more informed about aftercare than they ever have been. But Rick Schosberg, who's a trainer in New York that I'm sure most, if not all of you know, told me one time that it's always a stark reminder when he gets a new owner in, and most of the time when he asks them, he says he asks every owner what their plan is if they have a horse that needs to retire. What's your aftercare plan? And he said it's always kind of disheartening how much they don't know. They just kind of look to him for guidance, which is good, but they don't have a plan, and they just hope it doesn't happen to them. So helping to educate these people as they come into the industry, and we try to do that so much through all of our mechanisms, helping to educate them about how to properly bring their horse out of racing, just as well as we educate how to bring a horse into racing, and there's so many ways to do both. I think that will go a long way as far as industry PR as well, and I know it will help us as far as how we present the industry to people. So, having said all of that, I just want to say one more thing, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions or criticisms or anything that anyone has, but I just very, very truly and deeply want to say thank you to each person in this room, because I know how hard you guys work for the industry on so many different levels. Every day, everything you have, you give, and it's an industry that I love, and I am so appreciative to what you guys do for it. Words fail me to describe what you guys mean to me and the work you do means to me. I grew up loving horse racing. I was one of those kids who was obsessed with it, and then I started riding horses, and all we could afford was thoroughbreds, so I rode thoroughbreds in the hunter jumper ring. And then I loved it so much, I ended up putting myself through college exercise riding at the track, and I loved it, and it was fantastic. And then That helped me make enough connections after college that I got to work in communications for some of the best brands in the industry. And since then, I've gotten to own horses with my friends and just have a blast doing that. And now I get to be at the head of an organization that I feel like is really making a difference for aftercare in the industry. So as much as I feel lucky to be where I am, I also feel like that comes with a responsibility. And I know you guys work tremendously hard at what you do. So if there's anything I, myself, or of course the Retired Racehorse Project can do to help you guys in your efforts or to help cultivate your base of support in your areas or help with initiatives to bring aftercare either to a new audience or to answer questions or to refine your messages, please let me know. We would love to be involved with your efforts and support what you guys do. So thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. Yeah.
What is the requirement for a war horse?
That is a great question. I have found that it varies from horse show to horse show, which I find a little bit frustrating. For the Retired Racehorse Project, and I would have to look this up, and it is on our website, I believe they have to have either earned $200,000 or raced either 40 or 50 times, I believe. And I think there might be an age too. I think it might be 8 years old when they retired or older, raced either 40 or 50 times, or earned $200,000 or more. I'd have to look it up to be sure, but it's something like that. But I have found in the last couple of years, different thoroughbred-specific horse shows you go to have a little bit of their own take on that.
And for the makeover,
Yeah.
what are the requirements for that? Do you have to own the horse at a certain time, or?
No, it's they don't have to own the horse. We've actually had a lot of people who own the horse as a racehorse have someone use it for the makeover with the intention of then selling it after the makeover. And I mean, one of the best forms of protection a thoroughbred can have long-term in its career after racing is a solid foundation of retraining and manners and skills. And so we've had an increasing number of racing owners connect with us and ask if we could refer them to trainers to take their horse to the makeover, and then they decide with that trainer they might want to keep it for a child or grandchild. They might want to sell it after the makeover. They might have another avenue they want that horse to go into. So there are a few ways they can do it. But so for the 2019 makeover, for example, that horse had to have had its last race on or after July 1st of 2017, but it cannot have had its first more than 10 retraining rides before December 1st of 2018. And so if the horse bowed a tendon at the track, hopefully that gives them enough time to properly rehabilitate, and then they all start training on December 1st before the competition. Yeah.
I'm Bob Jefferson, president of HBPA here in Tampa, and I'm originally from Virginia. And I keep in touch with my friends in Virginia, most of them, for the last 30 years. What they tend to do in the past is gone using more warm blood instead of the thoroughbred. But now they say they're coming back to where they're actually using more thoroughbreds. And we actually, year before last, we actually sold a horse, not myself, but one of the trainers and owners in Tampa, that was a bad bleeder, but he was really sound. And we actually sold that horse for $5,000 because he was a big, good-looking horse, super mover. It was a whole deal with the bleeding. And we found over the years that Florida might be the worst place in America to get horses moved because we are a peninsula. And like in Virginia, you got a lot of places, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, North Carolina. So we've made more contacts with some of them through my two friends, and we've gotten some horses moved. You know, if they don't need a long period of time, you know, just need to say 6 months or something like that. So that's worked out pretty good for us.
That's fantastic. And actually, one of the resources that might be of biggest benefit to the people in this room in that vein is on our website we have thoroughbred-only classifieds. So it's sale ads for horses off the track, and they can be straight off the track. They can be horses that have been in their show career for 8-10 years and then be offered for sale. They can be brood mares that, maybe a mare didn't work out or had a difficult delivery, and it's just she's not the kind of horse you want to continue to breed. We get something like 120,000 views on that page monthly. That's a lot of eyeballs looking for thoroughbreds, and they're willing to pay good money for them. So if you guys have horses that you're looking to retire from racing, aftercare organizations who have horses up for adoption that just want more places to market the horses, that thoroughbred only classified is a really good resource that gets a lot of horses moved into really good homes.
Is there anything that you offer for example, HBPA affiliates to maybe we can sponsor something that would promote buyers to come from West Virginia horses? For example, somebody starts in West Virginia, we would be able to sponsor something that would promote those buyers to say, hey, if I buy a horse in West Virginia, he's run the last 10 times in a row there, he will make an extra this or whatever.
Let me start by saying I love you. Thank you for asking that question. Yes, we do have opportunities like that. We started doing special state-bred awards. So in the competition, there's a lot of different state breeding associations like Maryland and Pennsylvania and, Delaware. I think we had 12 of them, where they would award an extra anywhere from $1,000 to, I think New York did $5,500 to the top place horse from their state in our competition. That can also be structured to do something during the training process. So that award, instead of going to the top place horse, maybe goes toward a horse's training during their training into that competition. Or it could also be used on the flip side. If that horse is being sold after the competition, we could incorporate some kind of award if someone was willing to buy a horse that was a West Virginia bred. Maybe it comes with a stipend, which would be a huge driver for someone buying that horse. That's a great idea.
Jim, do you have the dates in October?
Yes. This year the competition will be October 2nd through 5th. So our preliminary competition will be on Wednesday and Thursday, and then the finale will be on Saturday. The finale is like the championship day. So from every division, the top 5 finishers from each division come back on Saturday, and they compete to see who wins each of those divisions. And then all of the division winners come back at the end of the day for the championship, and it's a text-to-vote kind of thing, so it really cultivates a lot of interest as well, especially if it's like a teenager with a Facebook page. I really think that is a big part of the way the Polo Pony won, is it was a teenager with a Facebook page, and he was competing against a lot of 30 and 40-year-olds, and he knew how to use his social network. But yeah, it's the 2nd through the 5th. It coincides with Keeneland, so a lot of times when people are in town for Keeneland, we've had trainers come down, and they're out there to claim a horse, and they pop over to the makeover and they see the horses they used to train or owners who come out there. So I definitely encourage you, if you'd like to come to the makeover, we'd love to have you, and you're welcome to email me. I'll try to get you some passes.
So where is it held?
That's a great question. I can't believe I didn't mention that. It is held in Lexington, Kentucky at the Kentucky Horse Park, where the World Equestrian Games were held in 2010. So it's a world-class venue, and so as you saw in that video, to be able to hold a thoroughbred-only competition in a world-class venue like that is really cool.
One of the things that actually started this with Stuart, the founder, all of the affiliates that are running at the time that the magazine has gone out, National has paid for the postage, and we've sent these magazines that Jim is talking about out to those affiliates. So most of the time I haven't sent it to affiliates that weren't running at the time. So let me know if you haven't received a box. That's because you just weren't operating at the time. But if you want to, that is something that we've done to try to help promote the Retired Racehorse Project, and just getting those magazines out there has been a tremendous aspect for the growth.
And I'll also say we've done a couple initiatives at different racetracks doing kind of a showcase between races because we're lucky enough to have horses from, I think this year, 41 different states coming to Kentucky to compete in the makeover. So we usually have ambassadors and competitors near any racetrack. So if any racetrack or any facility or organization would like us to do a showcase of these horses off of the track, we'd be more than happy to do that. It actually works really well between races on the apron of a race, or excuse me, the stretch of the racetrack. But we can also do things in the paddocks in the mornings, or however it works best with your facility. But we're happy to if you ever want that.
One last question, Jen. I really appreciate you bringing that up about the questions that you're getting from your engaged audience. What so far has been the response? Let's say, I'm not asking necessarily to quote what you told them about this situation that we're under in Santa Anita, but how is the response from your team going? Are they getting a positive from your response? And then also I would ask, is there a way to help facilitate or funnel some of those questions to one of the organizations such as us?
I'd love to funnel questions. It's been going well. My background is public relations, and social media is basically a PR exercise, so we are very careful about how we craft messaging on social media and in direct messages and all of that. So no question is ever a bad question, even when someone is asking a pointed or critical question. We always start with, that's a good question to ask, and I'd like to talk with you about it, the biggest questions we get are, why is this happening? And recently there have been a couple good articles that have come out. The Pollock Report did a really good Q&A that they took a lot of the comments that were on some of the initial articles they posted. They made that into a Q&A, and I thought that was a really useful Q&A, especially for us. There have been one or two other articles that have come out as well. They have had some good information. The Blood Horse put one out. And so we've used those to better articulate our responses, but we've also sent those articles to those people. And we had a really good conversation with our staff about, do we promote those articles on our Facebook page to that entire audience of 170, 180,000 people, or do we use them on an as-needed basis with the people asking? And so our decision up until this point has been, we have not been publicizing anything about it on our Facebook page because we don't want to get people worked up who otherwise wouldn't be, but we do use it to really empower the people who are asking us questions so they can. We're not an official anything when it comes to providing answers on this topic, so we try to empower them with the best sources of information so they can formulate their own responses, because I've found the biggest thing is they simply don't know where to get the information or what to Google,
Any more questions? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.